So in this segment, we're going to be talking about Liz Truss says Tory economic policy choked growth. I mean, this is incredible stuff, and I'm going to do a separate video on this, but I genuinely think that this leadership contest will break the Tory party, purely because it's a four-way split. I've seen Phil cover it. He talked about apparently there's a Boris Johnson, MPs want Boris Johnson to come back in, and some of the members do. Some of them want, what's her name, Penny Mordaunt, and those two aren't on the ballot. And obviously you've got Liz Truss and Sunak, who aren't that popular, and I don't think they can actually unite the party. And their leadership contest is becoming very, very bitter. I'll cover it at some point during next week. So the economic policies of previous Conservative and governments over the last 20 years have not effectively delivered growth, Tory leadership campaigner Liz Truss has said. And that's her attacking the Tories, because people say, obviously she's going to attack Labour. But the problem is Labour had more economic growth than the Tories did over the last, when they were in charge. Truss has criticised tax increases introduced by her rival Sunak, arguing they choked off growth. And again, the kind of tax rises that Sunak is doing is wrong. What we need to see is more windfall taxes. Sunak has promised to cut taxes and unleash economic growth once inflation came down, but inflation, based on the predictions I've seen, inflation won't come down until the end of 2023, and I think even then, I think that's very optimistic. Essentially economists are banking on the Ukrainian war on Russia's war on Ukraine ending soon. I don't know when that's going to end, and I don't know when things kind of go back to normal, quote normal. Economic policy has become the main battleground as the rivals battle to win over the party's members. And you think the economy wouldn't be something they would really go at, because Liz Truss had to have approved, in a sense, she would have to approve all of the tax rises Rishi Sunak has done, because she's part of the cabinet. He has to propose it to cabinet first, and if cabinet has an issue, they won't sign off on it. She would have to sign off on the tax rises, and also the fact that collective responsibility exists, that what one cabinet member does, it reflects all of them. So she can't come out arguing against the tax rises now. It doesn't make sense. Truss said she would drive through change. She's trying to portray herself as the candidate that's going to change everything. She's going to buck orthodoxy, kind of like what Johnson did in 2019, where he differentiated himself from Cameron and May, who are also Conservative politicians. She said, "We've had a consensus of the Treasury, of economists, with the Financial Times, with other outlets peddling a particular type of economic policy for the last 20 years. It hasn't delivered growth," and that's simply not the case. That you can't argue Blair and Brown's economic policies have been similar to Cameron and Osborne's, or even Philip Hammond and Theresa May. What Cameron and Osborne did was implement a ruthless amount of austerity and massive amounts of budget cuts, which are far different from what Tony Blair and Gordon Brown did. If you look at what the Tories have done for DWP, it's completely different to what Labour did when they ran the DWP, the Department for Work and Pensions. It's just ridiculous. Truss and those in the Treasury where she once worked under a Conservative government said they do have economic orthodoxy and they do resist change. I mean, you've got to figure out what works and what doesn't. Austerity is one of the things that doesn't work. That's why she's promising a lot of spending, a lot more quantitative easing. But unless she takes money out of the economy, which in my opinion has to be done through windfall taxes, it's a huge problem. One of the reasons why the UK's inflation is so bad is obviously the supply chain crisis, Brexit, no doubt, but also the fact that there's a lack of competition when it comes to supermarkets and other things, which means they can keep pushing up prices. We're seeing that with certain supermarkets getting, their CEOs are getting massive pay rises, but the workers aren't. Who's fueling inflation in that case? Truss said she would have liked Mr. Johnson to continue as Prime Minister, which I don't think is a very smart thing to say, despite promising to depart from his economic plan. And obviously, his economic plan was run by Rishi Sunak. And that's what's put Sunak in a very awkward position of, he can't promise, tax cuts. He can't promise certain cuts to happen because he should have done those. He had enough time. Right now I think he's promising to cut VAT on energy. Why didn't he do it? Everyone is having a go at him for it. Even Labour was saying they would cut the VAT on energy. Sunak didn't do it. So for him to promise it now is so stupid. Normally you would think that some of these people, right, could say, I would have done things differently. Which is fine. They wouldn't necessarily do things differently, but they can claim it. Sunak can't claim it because he was actually in charge. He was Chancellor of the Exchequer. He was the second most powerful person in government. Truss said her plan for an emergency budget to reverse the national insurance rise, which again, that national insurance rise is mostly there to cover up for the test and trace bill and the other amounts of the billions we wasted during COVID. scrap the planned corporation tax increase. And again, I don't think increasing corporation tax is a very good thing to do, especially because it's mainly small and medium businesses that pay it. Large businesses get away with not paying it for the most part. Suspend the green levies on energy bills, so let's not care about climate change. Great, and there's no guarantee that the consumers would actually get the benefit from scrapping any levies. She said it was not a gamble and would not drive inflation up further, but you're pumping more money into the economy. It's going to push inflation up. What she has to do is help people, working class people and kind of lower middle class people, but she also has to take money out from the top via windfall taxes. That's what has to happen here. She said she would also launch a review into taxation with the aim of ensuring people are not penalised for taking time out of work to care for family or children. I mean, that sounds fine. Some of these Tories, they come up with okay economic policies or social policies where you're like, that's not bad. But then you're just like, but are you actually going to implement it though? No, I mean, do you remember when Theresa May said there would be workers on the boards of major companies? Did that happen? No. Truss on her former Treasury role said, I control public spending effectively. You didn't though, did you? The Institute of Fiscal Studies, an influential think tank, has said Miss Truss's plans to cut taxes would cost at least £30 billion. So that's £30 billion gone out of the exchequer. And this idea that tax cuts and other things will fuel growth, if you do it for, working class people, sure, it can help. But if you do it for, richer people, for big corporations, it's not going to help. It's going to make things worse. All they'll do is things like stock buybacks, CEO pay increases. There are ways to do things more intelligently. We just haven't figured those out yet. Meanwhile, Sunak has made his case in the Telegraph, pledging to deliver a set of reforms, essentially Brexit 2.0. We've spoken about that. It says the best way to achieve economic growth is cutting taxes and bureaucracy and boosting private sector investment and innovation. Well, let's break this down, okay? Cutting taxes, you're raising taxes. Bureaucracy, you've added more bureaucracy. I'll cover a story on the chemical industry, where essentially they have to go through two sets of regulators now. So you've added more bureaucracy there. In terms of exports, you've added a ton of bureaucracy, and for imports as well. So you've added more bureaucracy, you've added more taxes, boosting private sector investment. The private sector is not investing as much. You're desperate to get Solvency II kind of deregulated, so that the insurance companies can pump more money into the economy. That's not going to happen. Saying as a matter of if, when, not if. And again, inflation won't be set under control until the end of next year, and that's only dependent on if the war in Ukraine ends. Because they ain't going to sort the supply chain crisis out. Some of the statements these people are making is ridiculous, but this blue-on-blue violence is what we've needed, from a Labour perspective, or if you're a Lib Dem, or Green, or whatever party you could be. Even if you're SNP, is that a decent Scottish accent? Was that? Okay, I won't do that again, I promise. Truss sounded sure-footed and confident in her interview with the BBC's Today programme, in contrast with Sunak's more hesitant and defensive performance in the same slot. He has to be defensive because he's saying, oh yeah, I'll do these changes as well, and they're like, why don't you do it? And it's like, the sun was in my eyes, and my wife's non-dom status was brought under the media, and I lost my green card, and stuff happened. Her critics, Truss's critics, point out the strength of her convictions now can be contrasted with the strength of rather different convictions in the past. Notably on Brexit, she voted to remain in 2016. Let's not forget she was a Liberal Democrat when she was younger. She was based. She didn't like the monarchy. If anyone could have that, Liz Truss, her. It's clear her economic convictions. She's determined to frame this contest around on the economy. Very surprising. She previously criticised the cuts in public spending during Cameron's time as Prime Minister. I don't remember her doing that, especially when she was a Treasury Minister as well. Bit sus. If she was really against Cameron's spending, she should have resigned as a minister. So what would have been her approach then? More borrowing as she advocates now, and where does she see the limit of borrowing? I genuinely don't know. I don't know how this is gonna play out here. But it's evident what she's doing here, and I just want to point out that if we look at the UK's GDP rise compared to France and the United Kingdom, I wanted to add in more graphs, but it got very confusing. I should have put it in an Excel sheet, but they don't have like the raw numbers in a table. But if you look at the UK's growth here, we're doing better than France. Around the levels France are doing. This is under New Labour. Better than France, worse than the USA. Not a ton in it though. When it comes to points, obviously financial crash happens. We crashed the most. You carry on going, and under if we start from 2011, if you have a look at the Cameron kind of Osborne stuff, you got 1.3, 1.4 growth, 2.3, hits 2.4. You did have a double dip recession as well. I remember that quite fondly. You've got under 2%, I think, on average. If you look at New Labour's growth, it's above 2% on average, maybe above 2.5%. I won't count the first year because you can't do anything in your first year, and we had a dip. But if you have a look, it's above 2.5 easy, maybe even above 3. But yeah, you can see that we've done okay comparative to the USA and France, but growth was slower under the Tories. For her to come out and attack the Tories over their economic performance is really something, given that she wasn't some backbencher for the most part. She was a junior minister and also a senior minister throughout the last decade. So very, very surprising from Liz Truss. But I guess she has to differentiate herself somehow from Sunak. And given the fact that Sunak was not the best in terms of being the Chancellor of the Exchequer, yes, the furlough scheme was good. Business support didn't go far enough. The support for the self-employed didn't go far enough. He did one good thing. That's about it, you could argue. But that's about it. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. I found this quite interesting. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.